This was a fun moment. You know, there's nothing better than hearing from people who've emigrated to this country from totalitarian countries about America, what they experienced versus what they see here, and both the good and the concerning. So this exchange, and a good example of this, we had her on when her book first came out, She Van Fleet from Virginia, who Chinese immigrant who lived through Mao as a young girl. And she sees, unfortunately, a lot of the earmarks of the Cultural Revolution in communist China and in this country right now with our political ruling class. So this exchange is of that kind, actually. A young woman, Chinese immigrant, confronts David Hogg. Remember David Hogg?
Oh, yeah. From Parkland.
Parkland survivor who became a outspoken and rather disagreeable proponent of taking away people's Second Amendment rights to protect themselves. Well, he's still out on the trail. And by the way, he didn't get any better from going to Harvard, as one can imagine. He's still on the speaker circuit, on the campaign trail, as it were, pushing the same anti-individual rights agenda, which is what it is, properly termed. And here's what he had to respond to at a recent talk he gave. Take a listen.
Hi, my name is Lily Tang Williams. Welcome to my live free or die state. Actually, I am a Chinese immigrant who survived communism. And under Mao, 40 million people were starving to death after he sold communism to them. And 20 million people died, murdered during his Cultural Revolution. So my question to you, David, is that can you guarantee me, a gun owner tonight, our government in the U.S., in D.C., will never become a tyrannical government? Can you guarantee that to me?
There's no way I can ever guarantee that any government will not be tyrannical.
Well, then the debate on gun control is over because I will never give up my guns. Never. And you should go to China to see how gun control works for dictatorship of CCP.
Mm-hmm. Great to hear from people who know, as opposed to people who've been, propagandized beyond the ability to reason, like young Mr. Hogg. For more on this and other topics, cultural and political, Tony Perkins joins us. He's the president of the Family Research Council. He's also a former state representative in Louisiana. And he is the host of a new show on the Salem Radio Network and Salem News Channel entitled This Week on the Hill. His debut this Sunday at 1 p.m. on our airwaves, 1 p.m. at AM 560, features none other than House Speaker Mike Johnson. Tony Perkins, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, good to be with you and Amy this morning.
Thank you for joining us. So, how about that? It's very interesting to hear those perspectives because they're sort of curtain closers. She Van Fleet in Virginia during a lot of the tumult at the school board level that led to the rise of Glenn Youngkin there. And, on the gun issue, which I don't want to say the debate is ever settled, but even most Democrats don't want to go there in this period of Soros-funded prosecutors who don't prosecute and politicians who are just a couple of iterations of the official story away from calling for the defunding of police.
Yeah, this is one of those issues that's clear contrast, as you just heard, between those who want freedom and those who don't have an appreciation for freedom, and their policies are leading toward tyrannical government. In fact, this is one of the issues that we're going to be talking about because these things are real. And with the slim majority, 218 Republicans to 215 Democrats, we've got a one-vote margin for the House. If we were to lose control of the House, these are the type policies that would be pushed forward by the Democrats to eliminate the Second Amendment, to impose their radical views on abortion on the entire nation, abortion till the moment of birth at taxpayer expense. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about, very real policies.
Speaking of the abortion issue in the wake of that state Supreme Court ruling in Arizona, the contrast is very interesting on the topic. It sort of implicates what you just described in terms of where President Trump is, as he announced earlier this week, and where Biden is, where President Trump is essentially taking the approach of federalism. Thanks to my nominees to the Supreme Court, we overturned bad law in Roe. And that's what the pro-life side wanted, this return to the states, and you've got to fight this out at the state level, and that's what my position is, versus Biden is promising to take federal action to impose his will on the nation through the Congress if he can't get it through the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is what they've done for 40 plus years, actually 50 going back to Roe v. Wade, is imposing it through the courts. So here's what happened in Arizona. Arizona just simply said, the Arizona Supreme Court said the legislature is the one that decides the policy, not the courts. And so the legislature is free to, come to that point of consensus. That's what we want. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it were not for President Trump, as you just laid out what he had to say. His Supreme Court nominees, his administration led to reversing Roe v. Wade and allowing this issue to be decided by policymakers. Now, that said, there is still a role for the federal government. There's consensus at the federal level that the government shouldn't be funding or facilitating abortion. But real policy, and I say this as a former state legislator who enacted a number of pro-life policies, that's where we're going to reach consensus the quickest, is at the state level, and the state should be able to do that. To contrast with what the Democrats want, they want to impose, and they've already passed this through the House under Democratic leadership, but they couldn't get it through the Senate back at the time, is the Women's Health Protection Act, which would eliminate almost every pro-life law in the nation and impose abortion until birth at taxpayer expense on every state in the nation. So they're not being honest. They're out there trying to twist and distort the Republican position because they want to hide their own position.
Speaking of Speaker Johnson, who you kick off your new show with, give us your assessment of the job he's done with that slim majority you were just describing, and a wide variety of opinion on a number of topic areas, from national security to taxing and spending.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about this weekend. Is we're going to unpack that. We're going to go beyond the headlines and the sound bites, and talk about what we can do, what he can do with this slim majority, and the consequence. A lot of people said, let's shut down the government. And he and I have talked about that, and he's not opposed to shutting down the government, but you've got to have a plan. And so we're going to talk about that this weekend, as what options does he have as the speaker? And, what the speaker has to lead the entire Congress, a very diverse Congress, but even among Republicans, with those 218, he's got to get every one of those votes in order to pass legislation. And so it's a very difficult job, slimmest majority in the history of the Congress. I don't think too many people want that job, and we're going to talk to him about that this weekend.
What about his relationship with Marjorie Taylor Greene as they're in this standoff?
They actually met this week. They had about an hour-long conversation discussing the situation, and that's another topic we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about vacating the chair. Is that a real threat? What could come of that? As I alluded to a few moments ago, what could happen if there is a motion to vacate, given the slim majority that the Republicans have? The Republicans, for the first time in the history of the Congress, could actually lose control of the Congress and it flip to Democrats in the middle of a session, giving the president the ability to get his agenda through both the House and the Senate. That would be horrific for Americans, because the Second Amendment would be at risk. We're talking about the sanctity of human life. We're talking about schools and what is happening at the local level. There's a thin red line, if you will, with just one Republican standing in the way of the Democrats having their entire agenda enacted.
So, with respect to Mike Johnson, it's not often we have somebody in the speaker's chair who is a conservative and an intellectual. And so, my main criticism of Mike Johnson, get your feedback on this. Maybe you pose it to him. Is that he hasn't done enough to leverage that ability that he has to be an explainer, to frame issues, to make the argument so that people understand exactly what the choices are. He's fallen back into essentially being a mechanic. And I know that's an important part of the job. And, again, managing all of those, herding all of those cats, as it were, in his caucus. But when it comes to things like government shutdown, frame the issue. Say, look, what we're talking about with respect to the open border is a real threat to the republic, and it is something where we should be willing to essentially use the power that we have, the power of the purse, to say we're not doing anything until we address this, to force the hand of the Senate, to force the hand of the executive. But look, I don't have the votes to do that. And I have to respect people who disagree, and we have to build coalitions. So, that becomes an engagement opportunity for the American people, both with their representatives now and as they contemplate who they want their representatives to be in November. But understand where I'm coming from and why I think it's as important as it is that, whatever power the federal government has in the opposition to these policies needs to be brought to bear. But I just don't have the support to bring it to bear at this moment, and drive different sorts of conversations rather than just sort of the mechanical ones about slim majorities and claiming that it's all Biden's fault. Yeah, it is, but show some sort of like vision and constructive philosophy in terms of how this could happen if the balance of power was a little bit different, and maybe if the electorate was a little bit more engaged.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan, and that is really the genesis behind This Week on the Hill that I'll be hosting each week with the speaker. He'll be on each week with me, and this is to provide that platform to go beyond the filtration of the legacy media to talk to the American people, to conservative voters about these issues. And what would be the consequences of shutting down the government? What leverage do we have that we can actually advance a conservative philosophy and conservative policies forward? And so that's actually what we're going to be exploring, and we're even going to look at that this weekend. But that's the reason for this platform, This Week on the Hill, is to be able to be uncensored by the media, to go beyond the headlines, go beyond the sound bites, and actually talk about what's happening behind the marbled pillars on Capitol Hill.
Great. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. Tony Perkins is, of course, the president of the Family Research Council, former state legislator in Louisiana, and he's the host of the new show we've been just discussing. That's both on Salem Radio Network and Salem News Channel, This Week on the Hill, and it features House Speaker Mike Johnson every week. It debuts this Sunday on our airwaves, Sunday at 1 p.m. here on AM 560, This Week on the Hill with Tony Perkins and Speaker Mike Johnson. Tony, thanks for joining us, and best of luck with the show.
All right, Dan, great to be with you and Amy this morning. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
It has been confirmed. Those brave Americans who are trying to preserve free speech continue to be censored, shadow banned, or silenced. Wealth Protection Research is on a mission to share the liberating ideas of some of America's brightest and most free thinkers, people like Jim Rickards and Porter Stansberry, whose ideas are putting financial control back in the hands of everyday people, helping them protect their money against a government that seems intent on destroying it. Text TRUTH to 76626 to find out more. As this election moves forward, we just released a report that reveals our 3 favorite ideas for protecting and growing your wealth during the 2024 election. These ideas are especially critical if you have an IRA or 401k. Text TRUTH to 76626. Discover ideas that are so simple and actionable they might save your retirement. Text TRUTH to 76626 now for your free report. That's TRUTH to 76626. Standard text and data rates may apply.
Choosing where to send your kids to school is one of the most important decisions